Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Coach's Corner University. I am Paul O'Need. I am your host, and today I'm joined by, one of my favorite people, Curtis Miller. Curtis is a strength and conditioning coach, owner of Ironbound Strength, and someone who I've had the pleasure of getting to know and working with over the last little bit. Curtis, welcome to the podcast.
Paul, thanks for having me, man. I've been looking forward to this one.
Me
You
too.
know, every
You
time,
keep ducking me.
dude, I know. And every time we get together in person, we have these like 2 hour conversations over way too much coffee.
Yep.
And we're like, dude, we just need to get on a podcast and continue this. So here we are,
Yeah. So listen, tell anyone who doesn't know who Curtis is, shame on you. But for the people who don't, tell us a little bit about Curtis. Like, what brought you here today?
man. All right, man. Well, I grew up in a very small town in Maryland, Denton, Maryland, and grew up around sports. Played soccer, played baseball, and had great parents growing up. Just did a really great job of letting me make my own mistakes,
Yeah.
but teaching me from my mistakes and just really helping me grow on my own and do the things that I really wanted to do and that I found interest in. I was actually big into cars, and I actually, after high school for a living, that's what I did. I worked on cars, custom sheet metal, custom fabrication.
Oh, I didn't
That
know
was,
that. That's cool.
yeah, man. So that was in like 2007. And of course, the economy was really terrible then. And a lot of the companies, the businesses that I was working for, they were shutting down because nobody wanted to do anything to their hot rods. And that's really when I found my love for the gym because after high school, I didn't initially go to college. And, I was going through all these jobs and my career was not working out the way I wanted it to. And I needed to find something to fill that competitiveness.
Mhm.
And one of my friends actually got me into the gym. And, when I was in high school, our sports coaches were very old school. They didn't really believe in lifting. They believed in practicing the game.
Mhm.
So, of course, we would do a lot of running. We would do, a lot of skill work, but never any resistance training, never any lifting. So I didn't really do much of that in high school. And, you know, uh, after high school is when I found the gym. Absolutely fell in love with it because it was a weird point in my life. I didn't have a job. I was going to have to change careers, and I spent so much time lifting, researching about lifting, just strength and conditioning training in general. It's when I first found Elite FTS, and this is like 2008.
Yep.
And I was talking to my sister one day. I was like, I really think I want to do this for a living. And her response was, well, don't wait until you're my age to go back to school like I did. She was in her 30s at the time.
Oh,
And
wow.
she said, if this is something that you really want to do, go after it. And, so I went back to school, went to Salisbury University, studied under some really good guys down there, learned a lot. And, the rest is history. That's when I decided to do my first meet.
Yeah, that
That's
was
when
gonna
I,
be my next question. Yeah.
yeah, during that time, it felt like so much had happened and changed in a very short amount of time. When I first started lifting, I didn't have any guidance. My in-person guidance, I will say.
Yeah.
My guidance was Muscle and Fitness magazine, which I had a subscription to, and then Elite FTS articles every night before I went to bed until like 1 or 2 in the morning. And that's how it got started. And first meet was in 2012. So I lifted for a few years before I decided to compete
Hmm.
because I was just like everybody else. It's like, well, I'm not ready to do a meet yet. I want to make sure I'm I'm hitting these numbers before I do a meet.
I didn't even know powerlifting was a thing.
Yeah, right.
Right. When I was lifting, I was just like, well, I want to be a better basketball player. I'm going to lift. I want to be a bigger football player. I'm going to lift. I'm rehabbing this knee surgery. I'm going to lift. It wasn't until I got to South Florida where they were like, yeah, like you got to fucking compete in something because these kids don't give a shit about you.
Right, dude. I mean, talk about the best way to build street cred, right?
Oh yeah.
Jump on a platform, lift some weights.
I was just on Ali Gilbert's podcast this morning and talking about like ego. Like, listen, we all have egos. And we were talking about this when we had coffee a couple months back. You know, even though I'm lifting with some strong dudes now and there's some young cats in the gym, listen, I'm going to show you who's the man.
Yeah.
And that's important.
Yeah.
It's
it's a lost art. It's like, I feel like when we were coming up, there were the older guys that talked about what they used to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying everybody, I'm not saying all the older guys, but we're the type of dudes that we're going to show you or hurt ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't think that either one of us are to that. Like, yeah, we're in our 30s, dude. Like, we're still young. We have a lot left to accomplish, but you're seeing so many younger individuals get into lifting now, which is really cool.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the way some people are going about getting into lifting now could be a little different, could be a little more beneficial. And that's where I think we come in and we're like, look, I love what you're doing. I like how things are evolving. Yet I think you would benefit from, a little bit of like old school mentality.
Okay, so this is a really good talking point, and I'm glad you brought it up because I think there's a changing of the guard right now in terms of the types of people that young lifters look up to.
Mm-hmm.
Back when we were younger, we looked up to the guys who had work ethic, the guys who were tough as nails. I remember, like the old Chuck Vogapol walking down an alley with two pit bulls in a tank top, kind of like that.
Yeah.
That's the kind of stuff we looked up to. Now the kids look up to people who haven't really accomplished anything meaningful, but can talk a big game, like the, nerds, dorks, those types of people. Guys who can buy off the rack. So where I'm going with this is like the motivations behind why they start lifting, I think have changed. I think the majority of people, if you took the phone out of their hand and took social media out of the equation, I don't think they'd be lifting.
You're exactly right. I think, where I train, Union Fitness in Pittsburgh, we're fortunate because we have some guys like myself who have been around lifting for a long time, but then a lot of the Pitt University powerlifting team will come there and train. So I get to see a really broad spectrum of lifters, and getting to talk to them and pick their brains and understand why it is that they train a little bit. And I would say a majority of them, not all of them, but a majority, once they graduate college and they're no longer in that team powerlifting atmosphere, they don't compete anymore. Some of them don't even lift anymore. So I think the reason people are getting into lifting is much different, like you said. And I think that's why you're seeing the modern powerlifter is their lifespan. I would say
I would agree with that.
In powerlifting.
I think it's a multifactorial thing too, because you have the motivations are purely extrinsic, right? They're not in it because they actually love it. They're in it because they get some sort of social validation. Mm-hmm. But then on top of that, there is this like highly specific, highly like intensity, frequency focused approach. I think a lot of them just burn out.
I would agree.
And like you could talk about results, you could talk about whatever, but like I never trained heavy unless I was competing. Mm-hmm. These kids are lifting 80, 90% year round.
Yes. And
The
you're doing it
argument
with,
is like specificity, right? If you want to
yes.
get good at lifting heavy, you have to lift heavy for sure. Totally agree. That's what the evidence says. But that's not the only way to get strong.
Mhm.
And there's also a person involved in that process. And this is something where I think you shine as a coach. That person needs to be the center of attention. And if you have this system that's organized with external validation and a highly specific, high churn rate approach, that's why you don't have a lot of guys that are, 30, 35, 40 that are still competing.
Mhm. I would agree. I think, when you're first starting out as a lifter, when you say I want to compete in powerlifting or I want to compete in anything, you have to have the specificity because you have to develop the skill.
Right.
It's got to be thousands and thousands of repetitions done correctly
Right.
or efficiently. But then after time, how are you going to continue to progress? Like if you're let's say you're squatting twice a week. With that mindset, what are you going to do? Are you going to squat 3 times a week? And then when you stop progressing from that, what are you going to do next? Are you going to squat 4 times a week? Like you're digging yourself a hole.
Mm-hmm.
So you see the benefits very quickly, but you don't see them last.
Yep.
And the body is capable of some crazy things,
Oh, well,
but it can't withstand years of strictly specificity. And when I say years, I mean, Matt Wenning always talks about the ones who, progress the best are the ones who last the longest. And you have to give yourself the opportunity to progress and reach your full potential. And I think if you're focusing only on specificity, you're not going to be able to get to that point. You will see it immediately in more instant gratification,
right.
but you're taking away the benefits of longevity.
So I like to I totally agree with you, and I'm going to continue to build on that, because when you talk about ways to increase strength the fastest, specificity is going to be right there, because you're going to get that really quick neurological adaptation. After you're maximized in terms of neurological adaptation, the only way to get stronger is to get bigger. You have to have more muscle to be able to use that, that high efficiency Ferrari engine of a central nervous system to fire. One of the things, this is going to sound really funny, these kids don't look like they lift.
No, I was just talking to somebody about this the other day.
Like,
Uh,
I want to walk in a room, and this is again pure ego. I want to walk in a room and I want people to go like, okay, that guy's a fucking tough motherfucker.
that's right. That's right, dude. But we also the people that we saw, men and women, powerlifting when we started powerlifting were jacked.
Yes.
They and the strongest people were jacked. It wasn't even like there was a direct correlation with how much you lifted and how much muscle you had. And I think that is what we always saw. And that's
Yeah.
what we want to be. But going back to more modern lifting is you see people who are freaks.
Oh, for sure.
Like people just coming off the street, maybe out of high school or maybe out of college, and just get under a bar and move unbelievable weight like I've never seen.
Yep.
They're seeing, we also have the opportunity to see people through social media lift these weights so we understand what's possible.
Yeah,
But
that 4-minute mile effect.
exactly. The other thing is there's a lack of focus on lifting efficiency and proper technique now. So you see people lifting unbelievable weights, but it looks like you can tell, you can call it when you're like, I give that person a couple more years. They're either going to break or they're going to get frustrated because they can't progress any further because that neurological input's going to come to a stop.
Yep.
And they're not going to be patient enough to take the time to take a step back, to fix their shit and put on muscle to continue to progress.
It was Andrew Locke who put it to me in probably the most simple way. And he says in his Australian accent, which I'm not even going to try to impersonate. He says, all the world records are done with impeccable technique.
Yes.
And you look at a Jamal Browner, you look at a Brian Carroll, you look at Julio Iglesias,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, knees over feet, hips back, neutral spine, beautiful squat mechanics.
Mm-hmm.
Because at limit strength, everything matters. Biomechanics matters, force production matters, timing matters. So what you're essentially doing, and this is a conversation I have very often because there are a lot of very young, incredibly talented lifters at the gym I'm at. I think about 5 or 6 guys who go to Worlds every year.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell them, like, you're creating a glass ceiling. Because whether you reach that ceiling from neurological adaptation or you reach that ceiling because biomechanically your leverages can't hold up to the loads that you're lifting, and then you get, we'll call them misuse injuries along the way, right? That medial knee pain, that lower back tightness, all those areas where torque dumps, you can't keep up with the training volumes required to to increase the strength, because at some point all these trade-offs, listen, the tax man's always going to get paid.
That's right.
It's either going to come via injury or frustration.
Yeah.
And if you're limiting yourself because your technique is suboptimal but you are continuing to progress your numbers, honestly, I wouldn't change anything either.
Mm-hmm.
But the mistake I made was I waited until it was broken before I fixed it, which is why I haven't squatted in 2 years. Right? So I try not to be, and I don't want this conversation to become like, back in my day, but these are lessons learned the hard way. We have the scars, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you have a conversation with a young lifter? Because I know you do work with quite a few young lifters. How do you manage that conversation around, like, hey, hold your horses?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously it can be tough because there's a lot of things that you could do more effectively in person.
Oh, of
Like
course.
I can take somebody and I can basically like put my hands on them and adjust them and show them the benefits of doing something a little differently.
Mhm.
But when you're talking, I think, and you and I have had this conversation before, you don't have to be an all-time world record holder to be a good coach.
I think
But
you're probably better off not being, but okay. Yeah.
yes, yes, but you have to have gone through trial and error and certain obstacles to be able to have that conversation effectively with your clients or with anybody.
Couldn't agree more.
So, do I enjoy the fact that I've had the injuries that I've had? No, but have they been able to show other people, a, what you could do better, but b, that you can come back from certain things
Mhm.
and get better. So for me, it's more of a, hey, this is the way I used to do it. This is what I changed, and you are very similar to me, and I think you would highly benefit from doing it this way. So trying to communicate, and this is where building relationships with your client is so important.
Mhm.
um, you have to establish their trust, but you also have to communicate with them in a way that relates yourself to them, not not bringing yourself up here and them down here, but putting yourself on the same level or bringing them up with you, like going down to get them and bring them up with you. So when you're having that conversation, putting yourself in their shoes and and voicing it in a way that doesn't make them feel stupid, but makes them understand. Um, I don't know if that's really, what you were going
No,
for, but
I think that hits the nail on the head, right? Like that relationship building with the person that you're trying to help. And then at the end of the day, when you're having a conversation about change, it's never going to be an easy conversation.
Mhm.
It's much easier to have that conversation when there is some sort of call to action, right? If we look at like change psychology, to go from that pre-contemplation phase to contemplation into action, there has to be a call to action, right? There has to be some sort of impetus for change. Usually in the scope of strength and conditioning, it's injury, but it could also be poor performance. And so if you can leverage these calls to action for that individual, it becomes much easier. That hard conversation comes when the person's still making progress, right? They're still seeing the numbers go up. If they're highly competitive, they're probably not happy the numbers aren't going up faster.
Yes.
But one thing that I always return back to is, do you love it?
Mhm.
I always ask them that question because if they love it, they're going to want to do it for a really long time.
Mhm.
And this is where my personal experience comes in play. This is also, I can point to the number of people that I've coached through similar situations. And that's how you get the buy-in. You show evidence.
Yes.
And at the end of the day, maybe that person needs to wait until they get injured. I know I did. I wouldn't have listened to anybody. It wouldn't have mattered what you said.
Mhm.
Like I remember I was waiting for knee surgery and I was working with Brian. He's like, bro, just chill. Like, it's okay.
Yeah.
You'll have the surgery, you'll come back. I'm like, no, I'm gonna keep training. Meanwhile, I can't walk down any stairs,
Right.
trying to front squat 4 plates.
Yeah.
I'm like, he's like, okay. And he let me do it. And that's one thing I always will appreciate about Brian. And I've told him that many times, is like, I needed to learn that way. And some people do need to learn that way. So that's cool.
Yeah.
I say my piece and I let them go.
Yeah. Definitely.
The other thing that I love studying people. I love watching people. And one of the things that has come, I don't know if it's actually a bad thing, but it is a thing with social media, is people believe that their points of view determine their value. So if they change their opinion on something, they automatically perceive that as a lack of credibility.
Mhm.
Whereas you or I would see that as a professionalism. It would see that as an asset to your professionalism if you can change your mind on something.
Right.
So you have these young kids, I shouldn't even say young kids, young coaches, young athletes that feel a certain way about something that is the best. And they're always searching for the best way to do something. And then if you come in with another point of view that challenges their narrative, well, they can't accept it because then they're invalid. What I try to tell people is like, you don't have to accept the narrative. You can integrate that new narrative into your current narrative, because nothing, like, all models are incorrect, but some of them work better than others.
Mhm.
Why can't you integrate?
Yeah. I mean, my thought process when I was coming through all this was, I'm not the expert, right? I was starting to dabble in something that I just enjoyed doing.
Yeah.
So I was listening to people who have been there and done that and taking what I needed to from it. It didn't mean that I was going to do what every single person was doing, or what every single person was saying, but we're intelligent human beings, and we're smart enough to listen to somebody talk or watch somebody do something and say, hey, something they're doing is working, and how can I fit that within myself and my beliefs and what I think. And you know it's you have to just, it doesn't matter if you're younger, if you're older, you have to be willing to adapt, um, to different, different situations.
This is one thing that I kind of conceptualized a few years ago and I've been returning to, is like, when you start out, you imitate, right? You
Mhm.
imitate everything around you. You do everything and you try to copy and paste into what you're doing. And as you get a little bit more information and you start to realize that there's many roads to Rome, now you start to integrate. Now you start, okay, I started imitating. Now I'm going to take a little bit from here, a little bit from there. I'm going to start to make my own system. And then once you've integrated, now you can innovate. Now you can be that person who comes up with the new ideas, the new ways of doing things. And you can't do that without going through the first few steps.
And those steps are a long time. Like that's a long period.
Time.
Yeah.
So you mentioned learning from a lot of different people. From my understanding, you've had a few different coaches, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, who have you worked with?
Yeah. So when I first started lifting, like I mentioned, I didn't have any coaches. I didn't really have any mentors. It was just a lot of trial and error. I managed to get decently far. I don't know if it was the same year. But you and I competed at the Arnold. I can't remember if I was in 2016 or 17.
I think I was in
But
16.
okay, I want to say I was 16 too.
I competed the year Casey got really sick.
Okay, same.
Yeah.
So we were there together. So I was competing in 198. I totaled like upper 1600s, I think, and that was when I met Casey. And I had been following him from Elite FTS, another young guy just like we were, and super strong. And I talked to him a little bit that day without bothering him because he wasn't feeling well, and he was getting ready to help open Union Fitness in Pittsburgh.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife at the time, we had just started dating for probably like a year. She was living down in Maryland in the same town that I was, but she grew up here in Pittsburgh. So we started traveling back and forth to see her family up here in Pittsburgh, and we would stop in and train in Union Fitness. So he and I got to know each other. I got to know the rest of the crew, and that's when I hired him as a coach.
Mm.
So it kind of just seemed like I didn't know where it was going to take me with lifting, but I knew that I was ready to go all in. What that meant for me. I understand that everybody's version of all in is
Much different.
is really different.
Yeah.
But for me, I was ready to do whatever I needed to do to become the best power lifter that I could be. And started working with him. We started traveling up here, once every probably 6 weeks, and it was a 6-hour drive each way. So we would drive up Friday night after we would get off work. Sometimes we would get up here at like 11 or midnight.
Oof.
And then we would wake up. We would go to the gym, train, learn, talk, go to lunch afterwards, talk more lifting.
Yeah.
And we would get in the car and we would head back home to Maryland. And I finally got to the point where I came home from work one day and I just walk in the door and I'm like, let's move to Pittsburgh. And she's like, what? Are you serious? I was that guy that was supposed to live in my hometown for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
Long story short, we moved up here and it kind of completely just catapulted my lifting career and my, professional career as well.
Were you guys married at that time already?
No.
No. Okay. So you got married after you moved to Pittsburgh.
Yeah. So
Okay,
we had been living together for a year.
in
And
sin.
yeah, that's right. And then we decided to move up here. And
Awesome.
at the time when we decided to move up here, she had a great teaching position, but she didn't have one up here yet, and I didn't have a job up here yet. We both just kind of were like, hey, we were like, that's where we need to be. We just knew that for ourselves and our future that this is where we need to be. And then finally, I think it was like 3 weeks before we moved up, Casey called me and he was like, hey man, I need a director of training here at the gym. Do you want the position? And I was like, holy shit. Like this is, I was worried that I wasn't going to find work. I was like, I work at Chipotle and get free burritos, but so that fell into place. And then after a couple of weeks of moving up here, my wife ended up getting a really good teaching position up here in Pittsburgh. So around that time is when Casey he opened Victory Float Lounge.
Mm-hmm.
so he kind of moved on from that. I did my own programming because that was in and out of COVID. That was around 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's when I ended up, we still trained together. We got a chance to train together, which was really cool. And he and other guys helped me progress towards my first 2,000-pound total. And after that, I was like, you know what? I want to take this, I want to give this everything I have. And I hired Josh Bryant.
Very cool.
And Josh and I worked together for we worked together for 3 meets. And part of the reason why I hired him was because I ruptured my bicep in the off season one year. And coming back, I was like, you know what? I'm going to go all in. I'm going to, work with Josh. And he helped me get back on the platform after my ruptured bicep. And then we did 2 more meets together. So learned a very different style of coaching, but similar in many ways.
Well, I just want to put this into perspective for people. So Curtis and I competed in 2006. He was at 198. I was at 242. And I out-totaled him by almost 300 pounds. And then Curtis has totaled over 2,000 now, and I have not. So
I think you still have it in you.
I honestly do too. But honestly, before this year, I would have said, no, I'm done. But I definitely think I have more in me as well. It's going to be a slow road, and I'm totally okay with that. But what would you say? Because I know how Josh coaches. I know how Casey used to coach. I also know how you coach.
Sure.
Stark difference between the two of them.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think has been the biggest influence on you and the way that you coach the people in front of you?
Yeah. So it was basically everything that I have gone through in the 11 years that I've been competing. So starting out lifting, I was all gas pedal, didn't know what I was doing. Worked with Casey. He made me work harder, but work smarter.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a lot of volume, building a lot of muscle. Then when I started working with Josh, Josh knew that I was already an established, intelligent lifter.
Mm-hmm.
He also knew that I was more on the reserve side when it came to my lifting.
Mm-hmm.
And you can ask my training partners, Casey, John, Joe, Cody, all of them. They would tell you that they used to have to put more weight on the bar for me when I was training. Like when I was building up to my first 800-pound squat, I would have weight on the bar, and they were like, "What are you doing?" And they would throw like extra 10, 15 pounds on the bar because I was more reserved,
Just conservative,
right?
yeah.
Yep. And when I started working with Josh was more gas pedal. He was more that kick in the ass.
Mm.
Josh was that, you're going to do this because I'm putting this on your program because I know you can do it. You're either going to do it or you're going to fail because you're not mentally strong enough for it, or you don't have the mental intent for it.
Right.
So for me as a coach now, it's about reading my athlete,
Mm-hmm.
understanding what type of lifter they are, and how coachable they are, what they respond to, also what they need.
Mm-hmm.
If they're a lifter who tends to be very reserved and lifts kind of slow, I'm going to get up in their ass with stuff that makes them not think and just react. So maybe I program them, rest pause bench or super short rest period to where they can't think. They just
Mm-hmm.
have to react. If it's a lifter that, is wanting to go just 100 miles an hour all the time, I purposely program things to pull them back.
Yep.
So to get back to your question, I think for me as a coach now, it's understanding what I needed to do to get to the next level, and then taking what I learned from the different styles of coaching and then using it to understand what type of athlete that I'm currently coaching.
Yeah, I love it. And that's one thing that, makes a great coach is that ability to relate to the person in front of them, to alter the way that they communicate. But not only that, the actual intervention itself, the program, has to fit the psychological profile of that person.
Yeah.
And Christian Thibodeau goes into this quite a bit when he talks about like neurotyping. Have you ever listened to anything on that?
A little bit.
I think it's fascinating. I think it's way too overcomplicated for what it is, but that's typical Christian style. Which I like appreciate it, but it's not for me. That type A person, that person who is super controlled, all gas pedal, very, in line and with everything, that person's going to fatigue really quickly. That person who's more type B, more relaxed, reserved, they're going to have a lot more in the gas tank. Pushing intensity is going to be harder. If you know that about the person, then you can talk to them in a way that empowers them to do the things that you want them to do. And then you program effectively for whatever their needs are. Well, progress is going to come.
That's right.
Where I think, again, people miss the boat with all of this is they try to fit the person to the program. What if that person doesn't like lifting the way that you want them to lift?
That's right. It ain't going to work. And you're going to have such a negative impact on that person and their outlook on lifting in general. And this is where, and I'm not going to get off topic, but this is where newer lifters coming in, I think it's very important that they find their own way for a little bit. They fall in love with training before they decide to really start, getting deep into the weeds. Because if you don't have that love to fall back on, it's going to be a very short ride for you. Because I can tell.
Oh yes, keep talking. Go.
I can tell you throughout some of my injuries, with my bicep and my hamstrings and quads and all this goofy shit, the times when you can't train the way that you want to, you've got to have the passion for training, or you're not going to want to do it anymore. And I think that's when you see people just get out, because when you first start training, you can go gas pedal all the time without any consequences, or with very limited consequences.
Yep.
But when life hits or injuries hit or whatever, if you don't have that main reason, for why it is that you train, it's going to be a rough time.
So I have two things to add to that, because it directly relates to my own story, right? Like when I decided to do a bodybuilding show, it's because I loved training and I couldn't train the way I wanted to. So I needed to find some other pursuit that gave me that same, we'll call it cognitive challenge. I got way more than I bargained for with that. Fucking crying, walking my dog, tired. But
Learned a lot.
I learned so much about myself. And it was purely for the love of training.
That's
And
right.
then when I remember when I spoke to Danny for the first time about working with me, she's like, "What do you want out of this?" And I said, "I want to have fun training again. That's it. That's the only goal that I have." And even right now, as I reintegrate the barbell work, I just want to love training again. I want to have fun. I want to be able to push myself. I want to be able to work hard. And when you're always in pain, it's always in the back of your mind. I'm still going to train. Even if I'm in pain, I'm still going to train. I might not be able to do the things that I want to do, but I'm still going to train. It's never going to stop. Whether Instagram's there, whether the business is there or not, I'm going to train. We're going to Jamaica to get married in a couple weeks. I'm going to train every day. Like,
right.
Liv doesn't want me to, but it's my wedding too.
Yeah.
She just wants to wake up with me every day. I'm like, okay,
Right.
you can have that.
Right.
But I also have this conversation with a lot of coaches, and I've actually had 2 or 3 consults with coaches for mentorship where we get on the call and I'm like, I don't think coaching is for you.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, what do you mean? I love it. I'm like, no, you love training or you love nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
You don't love helping people.
That's right.
Because a lot of what we do, and I'm sure you can speak to this to a very specific degree, a lot of what we do has very little to do with training, X's and O's, nutrition, and has everything to do with the person and helping the person.
Exactly.
And if you don't get your high from that interaction, you're not going to be successful. Point blank, period, end of sentence.
That's right. Well, there's two types of, there's two types of lifters really, or two types of clients. I'll say there's the ones that they just want you to tell them what to do, and they go do it. They'll run through a wall.
Yep.
You can tell them, hey, you're fucking up. Hey, you need to do this, and they go and fix it. Then there's the other type of person where you got to give them small wins every session or every week. Have to have those long conversations with them, build them up, right? So you got those two types of people, and if you can't do that as a coach, if you're not willing to take the time and you don't care enough about those types of people to be able to put that effort into them, then you're doing this for the wrong reason. I mean, how many people did you go to college with and you ask them like, hey man, why'd you decide to get into this, this profession? And they're like, I love to train. And you're like, that ain't the reason you need to be in this.
Yep.
Because yes, that's a part of it. You need to love to train, but you got to love helping other people more than you do yourself.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to be good at it and if you want them to succeed.
I'll also bring it back to like the fulfillment of your work. Okay. So if I'm just writing programs for people who want to run through a wall, first and foremost, I'm probably not going to be able to charge what I want to be charging because those
Right.
people just need a plan. They don't need me. They need my writing. So
Yes.
it's not a lot of value. But at that point, and you're just writing programs, where's the fulfillment come from? Where's the payoff come from? In my opinion, the payoff comes from that person thanking you, that person teaching their kid how to train properly, or that person encouraging their spouse to train, or that person winning a meet and being able to showcase to their friends what they've accomplished. Those things matter so much more if you have a relationship with the person. If
That's
you're
right.
just pen to paper, here's your program, did you really do anything? I don't think you did.
No, I agree. I think,
And at that point, it's a job, not a
right.
career.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, well, that's the difference in being a coach and a programmer. And I think the definition and the difference between those two things is very skewed right now because I think that depending on who you ask, you know, everybody will say they're a coach, but you know, you're not a coach if you just put X's and O's on a paper and give it to somebody. I'm sorry.
Nope.
What defines a coach is somebody who you you build a relationship with them and you understand the ins and outs and how to continue to help them progress while being able to adjust for their needs. You know, I think a lot of people right now, again, don't want to sound like the old guy, but I think a lot of coaches right now, they get their gratification from their clients putting their post up and telling everybody, hey, this person's my coach. This is what they're doing for me. So a lot of coaches' gratification right now isn't coming from seeing their lifters succeed. It's from getting the recognition coming back to them,
Yeah.
saying, look what my lifter's doing.
I think we're also seeing an instance where because there's so much information available, people are using the science to conflate reality. An example of this would be the growing body of evidence that dictates technique doesn't equal injury. And they've shown it time and time again that technique doesn't equal injury. Well, we forget that these studies are not done years over years.
That's right.
An injury is an overload to a tissue that exceeds capacity. That could be related to time. And the other thing it doesn't necessarily show is the research doesn't necessarily show the changes in technique improve strength.
That's right.
Well, how do you measure technique? Right. So there are limitations to the science. So using the science to validate that I don't need to coach this person formally, I just need to write a program that allows them to progressively overload. That's pretty lazy.
Extremely.
And I'll be the first to say, man, listen, some people just need a program. They just need a program that they can follow. And there are tons of amazing programs online that you can follow. My wife has 2 of them. I'm going to be launching some in the new year. So having programs available, I think, as any coach, as like a low price offering is a fantastic idea. But if you really want to impact people's lives, that comes through relationships. And I think you and I can definitely agree on that one.
100%. One thing I want to add to that real quick is you see a lot of guys, I'm not going to name them, but retired powerlifters who had very good lifting careers, who have a very different outlook on what powerlifting is about these days.
Right.
And I think, yeah. So, Greg and Donnie, and Donnie, both phenomenal lifters, right? 2 of the strongest human beings that ever walked the planet, did some great things.
Mm-hmm.
What's important to understand that I think guys like that don't understand is that powerlifting in the meaning of powerlifting to people has changed over the years. And the type of lifters that we were used to watching and the type of lifters that we were when we started lifting are much different than the type of lifters that are lifting now. So whereas they talk about what a coach is or what powerlifting is about and how powerlifting, the only thing you should want is to go and destroy everybody and win every meet. Yeah, I mean, to an extent, if you want to be the best powerlifter, yes. But what's the percentage of lifters who are powerlifting right now who that's their goal? It's I can tell you because, a majority of the meets that I go to, it doesn't have those type of lifters.
No.
It's got people that they want to become the best version of themselves that they can. If they don't go and win the fucking meet, they don't care. They want to walk away better than they did when they stepped on the platform. So that's the type of person that you have to coach.
I think a lot of people think that they want that. And I think a lot of people have no idea what's required in order to get that.
That's right.
And all we're doing as coaches is using training as a vehicle to teach self-mastery. And that doesn't necessarily involve winning a meet. And I'm going to be the first person to point out right now that you and I are both massive hypocrites because I would fucking love to destroy everybody.
That's right.
So
that's my
bias on the table. I'm here to take everyone's lunch money.
That's right.
But I think the lifter that I am has changed quite a bit over the years. And there's a lot of things that I'm not willing to sacrifice that I used to be able to sacrifice. Mm-hmm. And as a segue with that statement, what's next for Ironbound Strength? What's next for Curtis? I know you've got a lot of irons in the fire. What's going on? What's up? What's, the next 6 to 12 months?
Yeah. So, I stepped away a little bit from competing. I was having some, I got sick. I tore my quad going into my last competition, the Ghost Clash. I got Lyme disease over the summer. And I thought it was a good opportunity to take a step back, focus on my business, focus on my family, and I guess making up for lost time for the years of being so focused on competing and being the best lifter that I could. And, my goals for this next year are to actually expand the business.
Okay.
In different ways. You'll just have to wait and see what's coming, but bringing some other people onto the team, some other coaches.
Exciting. Cool.
In different disciplines.
Ooh.
So that's the what's planned for the next year. Also getting back on the platform. Um, my wife and I are starting a family.
Yeah.
So I guess we haven't fully announced it yet, but surprise. So that was always the goal as well. Growing up, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do with my life, but I knew I always wanted to be a father.
Mhm.
And you don't know when that's going to happen. You just kind of take things as it comes. And I kind of seized the timing of what the world was telling me.
Mhm.
And I was like, let's do this. And it's given me a different perspective and such a different outlook on things right now. And I'm really looking forward to using that and that different motivation, that different meaning of life, and bringing it into why I'm doing what I'm doing, whether that's with my business or
Yeah.
whether that's with my motivation to be on the platform. The thought of showing the next generation and my blood, what it means to work hard and to go after what it is that you want in life. At that makes me emotional just thinking about it.
When you told me that when we had coffee in Pittsburgh and you're like, I want my kid to see me compete. It took a while for that to compute for me, but that's very important to me and a big motivator for me wanting to get back on the platform. But I love what you said about the prioritization of things and how honestly things just work out, right? If you listen to what you really want, you kind of take stock of the situation as a whole, and that's hard to do when you're always in it.
Mhm.
But if you can zoom out and see this big picture and stay above and be like, hey, like this is everything I'm seeing, this is everything that's going on, and you start acting in alignment with your values, man, everything falls into place and everything becomes so much more clear. I love the idea of building the business in different disciplines. I think with your uh, like I even just with the slogan of the business, like being ironbound, being tied to the iron, that extends beyond powerlifting.
It sure does. Yep.
And it also extends beyond lifting weights in general. But maybe that's a conversation for another podcast. I
Yeah, we don't
have
have.
I have a couple quick hit questions for you.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, first one. What is well, I think I already know the answer, but what is your dream car? It's your car.
Uh, I have it.
I know.
Uh, a 1969 Mustang. Um, I didn't just quick summary. When I was 10, my dad comes in my room as I'm playing a racing game on PlayStation, the original
Yeah,
PlayStation.
yeah, the white one.
And I was racing with a Mustang. And he looks and he laughs and he goes, "You want to go pick one of those up?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "Let's go." We went. My mom's boss at the time was selling his. It was a 1970 Mustang. And we went and got it. And it changed my life. And it it really helped solidify my relationship with my dad,
Love it.
even throughout a lot of ups and downs in our family. It was the one thing that really helped us build a strong relationship. And this past summer we had a freak accident. The garage burnt down and we lost the car. And so we had this conversation and
Yeah.
we were like, we're never. I can't go through that again. For 25 years we had that car and we worked on it and restored it, and in a matter of minutes it was gone. So I was convinced that we weren't going to do that again. And then I told my wife, I was like, I gotta get another one. Like I can't
Mhm.
not have one. So I went out, I bought one, and uh, the day that I told my parents that we were having a kid, I had opened a box, or I gave my parents a box, and the first thing on top was a pair of keys to the car, and it was like, this is for everything that you guys did for me growing up. This is our car, and then underneath of it, It was a onesie that said "Grandpa's future racing buddy."
Oh man,
It was like
that's
the coolest.
amazing.
It was probably the coolest thing I've ever done. Right? Is give your parents a key to something that they gave to you for 25 years, and even though it happened in the worst possible
Mhm.
way, the rebirth of it was amazing, and that's why the car's license plate is actually Phoenix.
Oh, I love
So the rebirth and rising from the ashes and everything. But yeah, so that's my dream
that's
car.
a
I'm
great story, man.
very fortunate to be able to have that.
Dude, I love that. What is the scariest set you've ever done?
Oh boy. All right. Scariest set I've ever done was my first 800-pound squat.
I can,
Uh,
yeah, for sure.
was even regular, even if it would have went perfect, right?
Yeah, even if you didn't
So,
squat it high.
yeah. Hey, hey, I'm a wide squatter. If you were there in person,
Eye
it's
level thing, you know?
you know.
Okay, got it.
So look, leading up to that meet, this is when Casey and the guys were really pushing me.
Hmm.
And my goal going into that meet, my best competition squat up to that point was 735 or 745.
Hmm.
And my last training session, I was going to take 765. And Casey goes, "What the fuck are you doing? We're putting 785 on the bar. You're going to stand up if you give the effort. It just depends on how well you do it."
Hmm.
So I squatted it, felt a pop in my hamstring. We're 2 weeks out from the meet, right? I'm like, shit, I don't know what's going to happen, but I rehabbed it, did the best I could. We get on the platform. I take 760 for my second attempt. And I've started, as I'm going down, I started like blacking out. I didn't know where I was in the bottom of the squat. I felt the tension in my hips and in the wraps, and I just stood up, and it was high. So I knew my goal that meet was total 2,000 pounds. And I knew I needed a good squat. So I come over and I say, "Casey, what am I doing on this third attempt? Do I just take that again?" He goes, "Fuck no. I'm putting 804 on the bar, and you're going to go down and you're not going to come up until I say up." And I was like, "Okay." So I get under the bar and I realized something was off. Not with me, with the rack. And they had my rack height incorrect. It was like a hole or a hole and a half lower.
Mm.
So I go to unrack and I wedge my hips, and because of it being lower, my hips wedged in harder than they normally would, and I started falling backwards as soon as I unracked it. And the spotters catch me. They put me back in the rack. My buddy Jabez Burford, really good squatter, comes up and he says, "Hey, calm down. I'm going to adjust your rack height." Adjust the rack height a little bit. I get back under, and I remember I could hear a bunch of noise. I heard everybody saying, "You got this, you got this." That doesn't fucking matter.
No.
Because in your mind, I'm getting under this bar and I take a breath and I go, "Man, I don't know if I got this." It was like the first time I had ever said that in my mind.
Hmm.
Um, and I was exhausted. And I get under, and my dad wasn't there, but I heard his voice and he was like, "Hey, boy, get back under that bar." That's all
I
I
love
heard.
that.
That's all I heard, dude. And I get under that bar and I stand up and I unrack it, and it felt like it crushed me.
Yep.
Crushed me. I'm bent forward and I take as much air as I can, get as big as I can, and I'm going down. And it's the heaviest squat like feeling that I've ever felt in my life. And I keep going down. And I hear Casey say up, and I just remember trying to stand up like I was going to die if I didn't. And as soon as I come up, I feel my hamstring tear. I'm coming up and I'm like, "Fuck it. We are in this now, boy." And you are standing up.
Yep.
And I stood up, good lift, according to some people, not you.
I'm not a judge.
That's right.
I'm just a
And
dude on the internet.
yeah. And I remember that was the most terrified I'd ever been to get back under a bar, yet the most willing that I'd ever been to accept whatever the outcome was going to be. And that squat defined me as a lifter, as a person, as a coach, because of what I went through.
I love that. I love that. Mine was, I have two. One was during COVID. I squatted 750 for 2 in my basement by myself on an ER rack.
Nice.
But I didn't get video of it.
Well, then it didn't happen.
It didn't happen. But the scariest one I ever did was I tore my quad 4 weeks out from a meet, rehabbed it, took my opener, tore it again, loaded 700, and I'm like, I'm gonna squat this or I'm gonna not stand up.
Was that the Ghost Clash?
No. I never did Ghost. It was like a local like CPL Nationals meet, but
Okay.
it's like IPL affiliate. I did it in sleeves. So I sat down, pushed, right quad tore like Velcro. Like I just felt Velcro tear. The knees like,
oh yeah, boy.
Squatted 700 on one leg. I'm like,
yeah,
we're done here.
yeah.
Finish the meet.
You got to go through that though. I think everybody needs to.
Yeah, for sure. What's one album you can listen to, no skips?
So I'll be honest, I'm not a huge like know the album kind of guy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I know the artists, I know the songs, but I've never really researched like the names of the albums. But I can tell you now, you put on a majority, and I'm gonna be that dude. You put on a majority of Metallica albums.
I thought you were gonna say like Evanescence.
At times, it depends on.
You need a good cry.
Yeah.
It's there.
It depends on the mood. Nah, man, I can put on Metallica any day of the week and just want to take over the world. But I'll tell you, recently, because this is how old we are, when Creed announced that they were coming back out and they were going on tour, that's what we've had. Creed squat Saturdays in the gym, where that's all we do. That's right.
Sacrifice.
That's right. And you know what attracted me to them so much was all those Elite FTS training videos that Dave made.
Oh yeah.
And all of them had Creed playing in the background.
Creed or Tool? He loves Tool guy.
Yeah.
Last question. Who's one person you would like me to interview on this podcast? The caveat being is you have to help me get them on.
Man, Paul, that's like the hardest question. That's the hardest question. You know what? One person that you always see interviewing people, but you never see them just sit down, no holds barred, and just say what's on their mind is Dave. Dave Tate. He, like, and I know he's busy as shit. He's probably not going to come on the podcast.
Well, he will.
He's spent so much time, wanting to bring other coaches and other lifters to the forefront for people to learn. But unless you go talk to him in person, or, I've been fortunate enough to go to the Learn to Train seminars and some of the summits. And at the end of those, he sits down and he goes, all right, all the cameras, all the phones, turn the fuck off. We're not recording this. This is just, everything goes just conversation. And it's some of the best stuff I've ever heard.
He, when I did the podcast with him, he sat with me for like 6 hours over the course of that day, just talking.
Yes.
It was unreal. I will reach out. I'm actually going to reach out to him and see if I can get back on the podcast. I want to do it with Liv after she gets her pro card.
Yeah.
I think that'd be a lot of fun.
That'd be a lot of fun, man.
Dude, I really appreciate your time coming on. It's always a great time to chat. I would love to do as many of these as you want.
Well, next time you come to Pittsburgh, or when I finally make it up to Canada to visit, well, let's just stay mic'd up for the whole weekend, and we'll take some bits from.
That'd be so good. My editor would love that.
I'm sure we would have to be careful with some of the stuff.
Yes. Yeah. But man, thank you. Much. My pleasure. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. If you want to find Curtis, his links will be in the show notes. Thank you so much. Please make sure to like, share, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications. We'll see you next time.